Hello, welcome back. I'm Ken. We're visiting with Mike. Mike, we've talked a lot about different ways to do effective change in lots of different kinds of organizations. It's amazing how different leaders in very different organizations use some of the similar ideas or tools, or shall we say, nuggets of wisdom. Give us some more, please.
Well, last week we started about Exodus, book in the Bible where Moses take the people out of Egypt and move them to the promised land.
We're talking extreme change. Go ahead.
Yes, and the first thing that's striking is the time that it took. 40 years is a long time,
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of ins and outs that are kind of interesting to look at.
Mhm.
And maybe the first lesson to learn from that is that God was in charge, and yet it failed. At least the first iteration failed. So the point is, if God doing the things that He did and didn't work out, uh, it's a risk that you always have as a leader, is that people are rebellious. Rebellious, not necessarily in the saying, well, if that's what He wants, I'm against it, but more they're set in their ways and they're hard to change. Then I was trying to figure out why, when you look at the time that they were out of Egypt in the desert, how long were they there? What was the first phase? Phase one. And phase one comes to an end when they send some spies in the promised land to tell them what to expect. And they say, "No, you can't go. We'll never make it." And God said, "Well, okay, you don't want to go. You won't go. You're back in the desert. You flunked the course."
You get your
So
wish?
yeah, so I looked at that and said, "Okay, but how long were they in the first phase?" And I found a website and we had looked at all the different events that took place and during that Exodus. And as far as I can tell, it's about 8 months, that first phase. So 8 months, like I said last time, is a long time compared to the 3 days they could have if they'd taken the direct route.
Yes.
So then the question is, why was it required to have 8 months? Why that long kind of thing? Only to find that, I guess, eventually they flunked anyway. Uh, so that you the luxury that most of us have is there's an existing organization. We cannot necessarily wean people out of their current environment to get to mold them for a new environment, which was essentially coming out of Egypt as slaves to become part of the people who own the promised land. So uh, we don't have that luxury, but yet there has to be a realization that there has to be some fundamental changes in the mindset, the heart. And if you look at that, and you look at all the different events that took place during Exodus, and you ask yourself, how did that play in changing the hearts of the people? So, for instance, you have the plagues, a bunch of them. And the point is that why so many? And you know, God could have zapped the Pharaoh, and after the first time, you say you don't want to. Well, their will anyway. He could have, he could have taken a shortcut. He didn't. So was it to try to teach Pharaoh, or was it to teach the people that he was taking out of Egypt to go to the promised land? Most commentators in the Bible says, well, he was working on the Pharaoh's heart, but my, you could say the secondary benefit of that is also to get the people to realize who God is. He's got the wisdom, he's got the power, he's got all of the attributes that one, would expect to. if there's a way to think of what God is like, which none of us can comprehend, or the mind wide enough and bright enough to understand a fraction of
Yeah.
what that is. So
In
I think,
relation to the plagues,
yes,
I'm I'm inclined to switch them and say that God's primary purpose for the plagues was to help create that new mindset in his people. An oft
exactly.
repeated theme was don't be lured away by the gods that are around you. I am your
Yeah,
God. I am the one true and living God.
yeah,
And it's my understanding that most, if not all, of the plagues were a direct in the face of an Egyptian god,
yes,
showing I am God and this is just not a god. So
yes.
that's fascinating. And thank you for helping me gain that insight. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so it is there's a reason for a lot of those things, even though the Bible doesn't tell us that. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful of the Bible or the nature of the word, but there is something beyond just the religious aspect. As
We can
one
dig
like
deeper,
in the case is how do you get people to change their attitude, their values?
their
Okay.
mindset. Yes.
Well, first is you got to move them out of their comfort zone. You have to have a crisis. That's one of the things that my advisors were asking when I was doing my PhD. And they say, well, do you have to have a crisis? Well, not necessarily a crisis in a sense of doom pending, but more to create a want for a better setting and verbalizing that and to be attractive enough that people will want to make the change, to make a switch or to adapt new values. And the other thing also is that I find when Paul talks about change, he talks about putting on and putting off. And the first thing is it's not a matter of stopping certain things, is replacing it with other things. So you have to replace it. What are you going to replace it with? So that's part of the first phase of Exodus is how do you get people's attention and how do you gain credibility with them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the key thing. God doesn't need our credibility, and yet people have to. Yeah, he does what he means. He means what he does. It's we've got to understand that. We got to. So the same thing is applicable in our organization environment. The leadership has to gain credibility
Yeah.
to make things happen. And we see that with all of the other people that we looked at when we look at Nehemiah. The first thing he had to do is to convince people, say, hey, the king has given me the resources, we've given the permission, and we're look pretty bad, and we ought to ship up and clean up the place, kind of thing. And he had to build that credibility so that you know people would be willing to listen. Not that uh, the need wasn't there, but it's just that it's hard to move people. So that's one thing. Um, the second thing that's coming across, then when you look at that, is there were what 8 months in the desert, that first phase, according to that listing of the different events that I saw in an article. So 8 months is an awful long time. And during that time, what were the things that happened? One is that they had to experience God's meeting their needs, like the water, the food, all of those kinds of things. And again, it was a matter of how do you change people with experience, action. I remember the first job that I had, there were big signs in the factory that says, quality is number one. Whoopie-doo, what does that mean, And the point is that logo, posters and things of that sort don't necessarily translate into action. Action is what's required. And that's what we see again when we see Exodus, the last one, when the angel of death went over the country of Egypt to kill the firstborn. It required the Israelites to paint the doorpost and the lintel of their house with blood. First, I wouldn't want to be around with the flies. That's another story. And the other thing is, don't tell me that God and his angel didn't know where those guys were.
Yeah.
So why do that? And the point was, it was not for God or for the angel of death. It was for them.
Yes.
To be part of something, to have an investment, to appreciate what was going to happen or what had happened.
And again, it's not a poster on the wall, it's action. They
Action,
chose to
absolutely.
take action.
Absolutely. So you see that throughout the book, that the key thing that God was trying to do during those 8 months is to have the people experience success. And that's one of the first things that you want to have, is to have success. When I look at Nehemiah, one of the things that's interesting is that they rebuilt the wall, and then they have a celebration, and then they go over the law, and get the Ezra, I guess it was, to instruct the people and the leaders as to what their values ought to be, kind of thing. What the law said. So you see that it wasn't a sermon that got them going; his actions that got them going.
Yes.
And then once that's accomplished, then you can say, okay, this is really what we're about. This is what we believe. This is what we stand for. And people will say, yeah, I understand, because we've gone through this and that. So that's the way I would look at Exodus.
And even, well, maybe that's not a good way to start. In relation to credibility, those early
Yes,
successes, even if they may seem small,
yes,
build that credibility. I'm going to listen to this guy because
absolutely,
this is what happened.
absolutely, absolutely. And I've experienced that also in consulting work. When I go into a place and people think, we've been there before, kind of thing. And then we would get something happen and say, oh, wow, yeah, we can do something, something can happen. So
Some
the
other
local,
departments got jealous, said, how come he's not working with us?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's a process, and the leader has to be fully, I don't want to say in control, but to engineer the process in such a way that all of those kinds of things will be met.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it won't work. People will hear it say, ah, yeah,
Mhm.
you'll go away. We just ignore it.
Yeah.
As a consultant, one of the biggest criticism that you get is that how are you going to help us when you don't know what we're making or what we're doing or where we're selling, kind of thing. What do you know about this business or this industry? And the point is nothing. You know, but the key thing is the process that you're using, and the process helps you to get the results. So that's the thing. The other thing that's important is reminders, rituals, repetition. And you see that when God created well, after the angel of death went through, he said, now you'll every year you'll have to remember that. You'll have to celebrate that. Okay. And not only that, this is the first day of the year for you as far as you're concerned. This is the start.
I'm
So
hereby
every time,
declaring this to be New Year's. You can call it Passover, but it's New Year's Day.
exactly. So the point is that it's big deal. So how's this day come different from the others? The point is it's not the issue. The issue is remember what has happened, who I am, what I'm doing, where we're going, what you believe. Okay, and that's really how do you get people to really believe into something, to live according to something like that. Um, so you have to have those reinforcements, and it goes through the rituals, and it goes also with the the dress code as compared to normal kind of thing. I remember being in New York City and see the guys with those what do you call it, phylacteries,
Yep.
the things on the side of the trousers coming through, and the point is not that it is not a fashion statement kind of thing. It's a reminder.
Yep.
This is what I believe in. This is what I stand for. And in some ways, our culture has, how would I say, incorporated some of those things in areas that I find despicable, but that's another story. And I refer to the homosexual drive and the flags and everything else. Okay,
Hmm.
again, you
Gay
can look at
parades.
that and say, what is it? They're making a statement,
Hmm.
they're reinforcing their values, they make it visible, and not only that, but if you're not for it, then therefore you're a bigot.
Hmm.
you know. So
Hmm.
that's the way they feel. I don't feel that way, but that's another story. But the point is that you have the reminders, you have the visibility, and that's part of getting the mindset ingrained in the population because, like we saw with Nehemiah, he goes back to the home office, and guess what? People revert back to the old ways.
Yep.
Okay. People go through 8 months in the desert with Moses, and then they get to the gate, and not the gate, but the going to cross over, and they say, no, we won't go because people are too powerful for us. We can't handle it. So even with all those things and the reminders and the experiences, the attraction of the past, for one reason or another, which baffles me, is people revert back to the old ways. So that's the challenge.
Something tells me there's a whole lot more. We're about out of time. I'm looking forward to part three, next visit. Um, do you have any concluding remarks?
Well, the thing, one of the things that I was trying to teach when I was in a teaching capacity was look beyond the obvious and look the why. Like for instance, why so many days in the desert? Why take a long route? why have the elaborate design of the dress for the priest? Why and so on. And as you start and not question and say, I don't agree with that, but more say, what's the rationale behind it? And then that really helps you to appreciate the phase that is happening and how to handle it.
It's not pushback, it's purpose. You're
Yeah,
digging deeper for the purpose.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you very much. Looking forward to more, as I say. I keep saying that, don't I? Have a good day.
Thank you. Same to you. It's a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day.
Very good.